The look on his face. God, I wish I could bottle it. Pale as chalk, mouth twitching like he'd just bitten into a lemon rind, eyes darting between his lawyer and the judge, like maybe someone would wake him up from the nightmare he thought he was dreaming. But this wasn't a dream. This was the moment the curtain dropped. The moment he realized he'd played all the wrong cards. And I didn't even have to say a word. You know, people love to talk about karma, about how the universe balances things out. But I don't think the universe does much on its own. Sometimes karma needs a little push, and 3 years ago I gave it just that. When Mark and I got married, we were that couple. The kind people envy but secretly gossip about. He was tall, clean-cut, real estate charm oozing from every pore. I was fresh out of design school, hungry, driven, just naive enough to believe we were a team. We moved into a sleek condo in San Diego with ocean air and granite countertops, and we told ourselves we were building something real, an empire. That was the word he always used. Our empire. Funny thing is, I was the only one laying the bricks. Mark talked big, dressed bigger. He'd tell his clients I was the best interior designer in Southern California. He'd drop my name in meetings like it meant something. My wife can handle the remodel, too. We're a full package. But once the doors were closed and the smiles were put away, that charm turned sharp, cold, condescending. I remember the first time I showed him the branding proposal for the studio. I'd been working on it for weeks. Mood boards, color schemes, logo drafts. I was proud, excited. I wanted him to see what I was building. He barely looked at the screen before scoffing and saying, "It's cute. But maybe leave the business stuff to me, yeah?" That was his way. Always smiling in public. Always dismissing in private. He never lifted a finger. Not once. Not a call, not a contract, not a single hour spent on the business he would later claim was ours. But he insisted on handling the finances. Told me he'd manage the books, the taxes, the client payments. Said it was his role as the man in the relationship. That's when I started getting suspicious. Because somehow, despite clients paying thousands, I was constantly short on money. He'd say, "I had to cover some personal expenses, babe." Or, "It's all in the family anyway." Like I should just nod and thank him for taking my money. And for a while, I did. Because I loved him. Or I thought I did. Then came the celebrity client. It was a chance meeting at an open house. Mark introduced us, half joking that I could design her beach home. I followed up the next day, sent over a proposal, and somehow, miraculously, she said yes. That project changed everything. Bigger clients followed. Word spread. Suddenly, I had a wait list and a team of assistants. I worked late. I traveled. I hustled like my life depended on it. That's when Mark snapped. He accused me of cheating, said I was too close to clients, that I was too comfortable working with rich men. He yelled about how I'd forgotten who got you here, screamed that I was nothing without him. I stood there in our kitchen, watching the man I once adored through a wineglass against the wall, the red streaking down the paint like blood, and something inside me just shut off. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry, I just nodded. And that night, while he slept off his tantrum, I drove to Jenna's place and told her I needed a favor. My sister Jenna had always been the grounded one, the one who worked in finance, read contracts like bedtime stories, didn't fall for charm and cologne like I did. I told her everything, every red flag I'd ignored, every controlling comment, every time he made me feel small. And then I handed her the paperwork. We restructured the business that week. On paper, she became the sole owner of the studio. She held all the shares, all the rights. I took a creative director title with a generous salary and complete creative control. But legally, I had nothing. That way, if Mark ever came for it, if he ever tried to play dirty, I'd be protected. It wasn't revenge. Not then. It was self-preservation. And I kept quiet. For 3 years, I smiled through the cracks, played the perfect wife while quietly protecting everything I'd built. I think deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. And I was right. Because when the divorce hit, it wasn't just ugly. It was nuclear. Mark walked into that courtroom like he was walking into a business meeting he knew he'd win. His lawyer was smug, practically radiating confidence as she handed over a stack of documents, claiming Mark was an integral part of the business. They listed everything: emotional support, financial management, even brand collaboration. It was laughable. He wanted half of the studio, half the assets, and a share of future income. He even asked for back pay on what he believed he was owed. I didn't say a word. I just passed my attorney the folder Jenna and I had prepared months earlier. Inside was everything: ownership transfer dates, tax filings, operating agreements, all in Jenna's name. And when the judge asked for clarification, my lawyer smiled and said, "My client has no ownership in the company. She's an employee." I'll never forget the silence in that room. It was like someone had hit mute on life. Mark's lawyer stammered, flipping through pages, clearly blindsided. And Mark, he just sat there, stunned, like a man who thought he was cashing a winning lottery ticket, only to find out it was fake. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because while Mark lost the business, I was about to discover something far more twisted behind his need for control. I thought the courtroom reveal would be the peak, the grand finale where I walked away triumphant, clean break and all. But no, that moment was just the unmasking. What came after was the unraveling, because when a man like Mark loses control, he doesn't retreat. He scrambles. He digs. He claws for any last shred of power, and that's when the real ugliness started to ooze out. A week after the court hearing, I came home to find my mailbox stuffed with papers. Old bills in my name, credit cards I never applied for, bank accounts I didn't recognize. At first I thought it was just junk mail, but something about the envelopes felt off, like they'd been sent with purpose, intentional. I took them inside and sat on the floor of my apartment, the same apartment I'd moved into 3 months before filing for divorce, and I started digging through them. My heart dropped. There were at least 5 accounts in my name that I'd never opened. Credit cards maxed out, late payments, even a business loan from 3 years ago. Taken just a month after I'd restructured ownership with Jenna. I didn't need a forensic accountant to figure it out. I knew exactly what had happened. Mark had been forging my name. For years. He'd used my identity, my social security number, hell, even my old signature, which he'd seen me scribble 1,000 times on rent checks and contracts, and racked up debt behind my back. And now that he couldn't get the business, he was trying to leave me holding the bag. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was sabotage. And you want to know the worst part? Somewhere deep down I wasn't surprised. I'd always known something wasn't right with him. That control wasn't love. That his compliments came with strings. And his support was really a leash. But it's one thing to feel gaslit. It's another to see the receipts. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt something colder, sharper. I stood up, grabbed my keys and drove to Jenna's. And this time, I wasn't asking for help. I was telling her we were going to war. Jenna didn't flinch. She brought out her laptop, pulled up spreadsheets, scanned my credit reports, and started making calls. Within hours, she had a contact at a financial fraud investigator's office, and by the next morning, we had a meeting scheduled. I filed a police report, brought in the documents, and gave them everything. And just like that, the tables turned again. The investigator confirmed what we already suspected. Someone had used my identity to apply for loans, cards, and open accounts over the course of nearly 4 years. The trail wasn't clean. Mark had gotten cocky, leaving digital fingerprints, IP addresses, even a few signed documents that matched his own handwriting from other contracts. It was all there. The only question was, did I want to press charges? It's a weird thing, staring down the option of jail time for someone you used to wake up next to, the man who used to bring you coffee in bed, who kissed your forehead while you slept, right before slipping your wallet out of your purse. But in the end, I didn't make the decision out of spite. I did it because I had to. Because people like Mark don't stop. They push and push until they're stopped. And still, Even with a criminal investigation underway, he kept trying to win. He started spreading rumors, told mutual friends I was unstable, vindictive, that I'd used him to build my career and then discarded him when I got famous. I heard whispers at networking events, cold shoulders from people I'd worked with for years. Some believed him, some didn't, but the seed was planted. That was his real weapon. Manipulation. He didn't need a courtroom to destroy someone. He just needed to poison the water. And for a while, I let it get to me. I stopped posting on social media. I pulled back from work. I second-guessed every conversation, every sideways glance. I felt like I was living in a fog of shame for something I didn't even do. It was like the emotional abuse hadn't ended. It had just changed shape. But then something happened. One night, around 2 a.m., I was scrolling through old emails, cleaning out my inbox, when I stumbled across a draft I'd written years ago. It was a letter, not to anyone specific, just a vent, a raw, messy stream of thoughts I'd typed in the early days of the marriage. I titled it When He Makes You Feel Small. I read every word. It was a time capsule, a record of every red flag I'd ignored, every excuse I'd made. He doesn't mean it. He's just stressed. It's my fault. I work too much. I was trying so hard to keep the illusion of partnership alive that I didn't realize I was the only one putting in the work. And reading it now, with everything that had happened, it didn't make me cry. It made me furious, not just at Mark, but at myself, for shrinking, for letting someone chip away at me one criticism at a time, for thinking love meant tolerating disrespect. And in that moment, something clicked. I didn't survive Mark. I outgrew him, and it was time to reclaim my story, not as a victim, but as a woman who'd been underestimated, gaslit, manipulated, and still came out on top. But just as I was ready to move forward, just as I thought the worst was behind me, I got a call that would flip everything on its head. It was Mark's lawyer, and she had a deal to offer. I nearly didn't answer the phone when I saw the caller ID. My instinct was to let it ring, let her leave a voicemail and sit in silence with whatever nonsense they were about to spin. But some part of me, curiosity, closure, maybe even the smallest remaining ember of rage, picked up. She didn't waste time. Lisa, we'd like to propose a settlement. Off the record. No court, no press. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence hang, waiting for the catch. Then she added, Mark is prepared to drop all remaining claims, including the appeal on the spousal support ruling. In exchange, you agree not to pursue criminal charges. There it was. The desperation. I almost laughed. He was drowning now, and this was his lifeline. Not because he wanted peace, but because he was scared. The fraud investigation had teeth. He knew it. The evidence was piling up. His little game of smoke and mirrors had turned into a blazing fire, and I was the one holding the extinguisher, or the gasoline. I asked her one question. Did he admit to forging my name? She hesitated. Then carefully. We're willing to accept that. Mistakes were made. The priority now is avoiding public fallout. For both of you. I ended the call without giving her an answer. And then I sat there in my kitchen, alone, staring at the chipped edge of my coffee mug, like it held the answer to some philosophical question. I wasn't looking for revenge. Not at first. I just wanted to protect myself. But after everything, being manipulated, stolen from, humiliated, was it still just about protection? Or was it about showing him that I wasn't scared anymore? I spoke to Jenna that night, laid it all out. The offer, the options, the quiet route, the storm. She looked at me and said, What do you want him to remember when he hears your name? And that's what it came down to. I didn't want him to flinch at the thought of me. I wanted him to know he lost not just because he was careless, or cruel, or arrogant, but because I was smarter than him, because I saw through him before he even realized he was transparent. So I declined the deal. I let the investigators do their work. Slowly, methodically, they built the case. I provided everything, emails, documents, witness statements. Jenna even found an old group message where Mark had joked about knowing all my passwords and being the silent partner. That didn't age well. 2 months later, he was charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and falsifying documents. He tried to play it cool at first, showed up in a blazer like he was going to a business brunch, not a criminal hearing. But I watched from the back of the courtroom as his smirk cracked when the prosecutor laid out the timeline, the paper trail, the lies. And when they read the charges out loud, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. But that freedom came with a strange emptiness, because no matter how much justice is served, you still walk away with scars. I'd spent years building something with someone who, in the end, was never building with me. He was just carving out his piece to take later. I started going to therapy not long after the hearing. I didn't tell many people. It wasn't for the drama. It was for the residue, the subtle ways my trust had been eroded, the way I second-guessed every good thing that happened, as if joy came with a catch. I had to learn how to live in safety again. How to believe that not everyone was out to control, or manipulate, or drain me. Work helped. The studio kept growing, thriving even. Jenna and I made it official. She remained the legal owner, but we merged operations. We co-led projects, brought in new talent, even expanded into staging luxury properties. And every time I signed a contract now, I made damn sure I read every word. But just when life started feeling normal again, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Natalie, an old friend of Mark's. She was always sweet to me, always supportive. She used to joke that I was way too good for him, even when we were still playing the perfect couple for Instagram. We bumped into each other at a networking event in LA. She hugged me tight, then pulled back with a nervous look. "I've been meaning to reach out," she said, "but I didn't know if you'd want to talk to me. After everything." I blinked. Why wouldn't I? And that's when she dropped the real twist. Because apparently, Mark's little games had gone deeper than I thought. She told me, quietly, carefully, that during the last year of our marriage, Mark had been talking to someone else, not just flirting, planning, plotting. He'd been having an emotional affair with one of his clients, a woman who owned several properties in Malibu. Wealthy, divorced, lonely. And from the sound of it, Mark was betting on her as his escape plan, his upgrade. He told Natalie he was done with Lisa, that I was obsessed with my work, and cold, and that once he got what he was owed from the divorce, he'd start fresh with this new woman. But when the business didn't pan out, when I outplayed him, that plan crumbled too. The woman dumped him the moment the fraud investigation began. He didn't just lose me. He lost everyone. I went home that night and sat in silence, not angry, not smug, just numb. Because all along I thought I was playing defense. But I was never even on the same board. After hearing everything from Natalie, I couldn't sleep that night. My mind ran in loops, not because I was heartbroken. God, that feeling had expired long ago, but because I realized just how deep the betrayal had gone. It wasn't just about the business, the money, or even the cheating. It was that he had calculated his exit strategy long before things truly fell apart. While I was still trying to save our marriage, clinging to the pieces of something I thought was worth fixing, he was already drafting his next chapter without me. And yet, here I was, still standing. Not just standing, thriving. I had everything he thought he could take from me. Not just the business or the money, but my peace, my dignity, my identity. He wanted to reduce me to a bitter ex-wife with a sob story. Instead, I became the woman who outsmarted him before he even realized the game had started. The irony was, I didn't even hate him anymore. Not really. What I felt was closer to pity. That kind of emptiness he carried, always needing validation, always chasing power through someone else's shine. It was a hunger that couldn't be fed. Not by me, not by that woman in Malibu, not by anyone. Still, closure is a tricky thing. You don't just get it from winning a court case or exposing a fraud. Sometimes, closure comes in the form of a moment you never saw coming. It was about 6 months after his conviction. I was meeting a client at a downtown hotel. Big project, penthouse redesign. And while I was waiting in the lounge, sipping an overpriced coffee, I heard someone say my name. I turned, and there he was. Mark. Not in a suit, not with his usual cocky grin or salesman energy. He looked smaller. Not physically, just diminished, like the edges had softened or maybe just worn down. His eyes didn't meet mine right away. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel that rush of anger or anxiety or nausea that used to come when I saw him. I felt calm, almost detached, like I was looking at a stranger who vaguely resembled someone I used to know. He said my name again, like he wasn't sure it was really me. I nodded. Mark. He shuffled closer but kept a strange distance, like even he knew how unwelcome he was in my orbit now. I didn't know you'd be here. I live here, I said. This is my city. He gave a weak laugh, like he was trying to be charming again, but didn't remember how. You look great, like really great. I didn't thank him. Just looked at him. Really looked. He had aged. The tan from all his real estate schmoozing had faded, replaced by a paler, worn-out version of himself. His shirt was wrinkled, collar a bit stained. I caught a glimpse of scuffed shoes. He wasn't struggling exactly, but he wasn't thriving either. It was a man who had fallen, but not quite hit the bottom. Not yet. I heard about the business. He added quietly, Congrats. You really made it. That part stung, in a way I didn't expect. Because I had made it. But not with him. Not with the person I once thought I'd build a life with. That version of me, the hopeful, trusting, ride-or-die wife, was gone, buried under years of gaslighting and broken promises. He hesitated, then finally asked, Do you hate me? The question hit harder than I thought it would. I looked at him, and in that moment I realized something that had taken years to come into focus. No, I said. I don't hate you. I just don't believe you anymore. And that's worse. He nodded slowly, as if he knew there was nothing he could say to fix that. And there wasn't. He stood there for another moment, like he wanted to ask something else. Maybe for forgiveness, maybe for reassurance that he wasn't a villain in everyone's story. But I didn't give him that comfort. I didn't owe it to him. When my client arrived, I turned without another word and walked away. That was the last time I saw him in person. But his shadow lingered, briefly. Word got around in our circles that Mark tried to start a new real estate firm. It fizzled. He moved to Nevada for a while. Tried his hand at motivational speaking of all things. Ironic, considering he couldn't motivate himself to be decent when it counted. Meanwhile, my life kept expanding. My studio became one of the most sought-after design firms in Southern California. Jenna and I started a podcast together, talking about design, business, and, eventually, our story. Not to name names or rehash trauma, but to show women that protecting your peace before the storm is not paranoia. It's wisdom. The podcast blew up more than we expected. Emails flooded in. Women shared their own stories. So many with eerily similar patterns. The charming partner who slowly became a controller. The shared dream that always favored one person's power. The gaslighting, the financial manipulation, the subtle erasure of self. It was sobering and affirming. I wasn't alone. I wasn't the outlier. I was part of a silent sisterhood waking up, reclaiming our names, our businesses, our narratives. And then one night, I got a letter, a real one, handwritten, no return address. But I knew his handwriting instantly. I almost didn't open it. But again, curiosity has its hooks. Inside was a single page, short, careful. It read, Lisa, I know I ruined everything. I know I don't deserve a response. But I wanted you to know. I finally get it. Not just what I did, but who I was. You didn't just outsmart me. You saw through me before I could even see myself. I lost something real, and I'll probably spend the rest of my life pretending I didn't. That's my punishment. Mark no apology, no excuses, just resignation. I burned the letter. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need anything from him anymore. It's strange how healing doesn't come in some big, dramatic wave. It creeps in slowly, like sunlight through curtains you forgot to close. You don't notice it at first. But one day you wake up, and the heaviness on your chest is gone. You breathe deeper. You laugh easier. You stop waiting for the next disaster because the storm has passed, and this time, it's really over. For me, that moment came unexpectedly. Not in court, not in that last encounter with Mark, but on a Sunday morning almost a year later, while watering the little herb garden on my balcony. I remember leaning over the rosemary, the smell of it sharp and clean, and realizing there was nothing left to fear, nothing left to defend. I was no longer someone rebuilding from pain. I was someone building from choice. From that day on, my work changed. My vision for the studio evolved. We started mentoring young women, creatives who had been told their ideas were cute, or impractical, or better as hobbies. I created a scholarship fund for aspiring female designers, especially those from underrepresented communities. I didn't want to just design homes. I wanted to design freedom, and not just for me. My relationship with Jenna deepened in ways I never expected. She had been my backup plan, my legal safety net, but also, without realizing it, my emotional lifeline. We started taking yearly sister trips, just the two of us. No laptops, no meetings, just wine, beaches, and remembering that we were so much more than what men had done to us. And then there was something else, something I hadn't allowed myself to believe in again. Love. I didn't go looking for it. Honestly, I was done with the whole concept. I had dated casually. Dinners, coffees, polite laughter, but I kept everyone at arm's length. I didn't want to risk giving someone access to my life, only for them to use it as leverage. But he didn't ask for access. He just showed up, quietly, patiently, in all the spaces Mark never dared to go. His name was Daniel, a client at first, widowed, father of 2. He had hired me to redesign his home after his wife passed, said the space felt frozen in time, and he didn't know how to breathe in it anymore. Our meetings were soft, muted, filled with silences that didn't feel empty. And slowly, almost accidentally, we began talking about more than design, about grief, about resilience, about the weird guilt of moving on. He never rushed me, never played games, never made me feel like I had to prove anything. When he told me he was falling in love, I didn't run. I didn't question it to death. I just listened to my own heart, finally quiet enough to be heard, and let it speak. It said, "Safe doesn't mean boring. Peace doesn't mean weak. You can love again without surrendering yourself." I didn't need Daniel, but I chose him. And that, I've learned, is the most powerful kind of love there is. As for Mark, I sometimes wonder what became of him. Last I heard, through a mutual friend who didn't realize we weren't on speaking terms, he was living out of a condo in Vegas, working for a mid-tier real estate agency, barely holding on. He never remarried. No kids, no empire, just a man with a very long list of things he thought he was owed. And the thing is, I don't wish him ill. I don't sit around hoping he suffers or fails. That kind of bitterness is just another form of attachment. I've let him go in every way that matters. He can chase whatever version of power he still believes in, because I already have mine, and no one can take it this time. Looking back, I realize I didn't beat him by being smarter or luckier. I beat him because I learned to trust myself more than I trusted the fantasy. I learned to see the storm coming and move my foundation before it hit. I played long, not to win a game, but to walk away whole. So here's what I'll leave you with, if you're listening. If someone makes you feel like you owe them for your success, run. If someone loves the version of you that's small, manageable, easy to control, run faster. If someone tells you that everything you've built is only real because they let it be, smile politely and protect what's yours, quietly, carefully, legally. And when they come for it, when they try to rip it from your hands with claws they once called love, let them realize too late, they were never fighting you. They were fighting the woman you became when they underestimated you. And that woman, she doesn't lose.